There are a lot of very powerful weapons within the Marvel Cinematic Universe. Iron Man's repulsors, Captain America's shield, pretty much anything that Rocket Raccoon touches, and yet none of them are in the same league as those that are best described as god weapons. Wielded by some of the most powerful beings in existence, often granting their users some very impressive abilities, these tools of destruction are a sight to behold. So why not go through and take a look at them? Maybe compare them to their comic counterparts, and who might have used them over the years. Also, just a heads up, the Infinity Gauntlet and the 10 Rings will not be appearing on this list, because while they are incredibly powerful and power-wise probably qualify as god weapons, they haven't been wielded by actual gods, and as far as we know, they weren't created by them, so they aren't on the list. Oh, and also slight spoilers for Thor: Love and Thunder are ahead. So you've been warned. Without any further ado, let's go ahead and dive right into it. As it was the first god weapon we ever saw within the MCU, I figured this should probably be the first one that I talk about on this list. Mjolnir isn't just a word that some people struggle to say, it's also the weapon wielded by the god of thunder himself, Thor, and also his ex-girlfriend Jane, but that's a thing. It was actually pretty cool. Now, if you're watching this video, I think it's pretty safe to assume that you already know pretty much everything there is to know about the hammer in the movies. Heck, if you've been paying attention at all since the first Thor film came out in 2011, you probably know all you need to know even if you haven't watched the movies. So how about I just go ahead and throw out some interesting trivia that you might not know about it? Because that'd probably be a lot more fun than me going through the story of the hammer and all that and just covering a bunch of stuff that you already know. In the comics, Mjolnir grants its user lightning-based powers because an elder god known as the God Tempest was imprisoned within it by Odin eons ago. While the films do not expressly say that this is also the case on screen, the fact that the hammer seems to be somewhat conscious and able to make its own choices, I choose to believe roughly the same thing is true here. The name of the hammer, Mjolnir, roughly translates to that which smashes within traditional Norse mythology, which has got to be about the most on-the-nose name for a hammer of all time. I mean, if it wasn't really capable of smashing, I'd be a little disappointed. And finally, in Ragnarok, we saw that Thor disguised the hammer as an umbrella while out and about around civilians. And with a simple tap on the ground, it was able to change back. This is very reminiscent of the comics, where Thor disguised it as a walking cane while in the guise of Dr. Donald Blake. And in order to change back into his godly form, he did exactly like he did in the movies and just slammed it into the ground. See, wasn't that more fun than me just listing out its film appearances and stuff like that? I think it was a lot more interesting, and I certainly had a better time. After Mjolnir was crushed by Hela, Thor spent some time weaponless, before he went and met up with giant Peter Dinklage, who he had craft him an all-new weapon so that he could go and royally kick Thanos' ass. Theoretically, at least. This new weapon was Stormbreaker. The big fancy feature of this implement of Titan beheading is the fact that it can summon the Bifrost, which came in super handy during the most recent Thor film, as it allowed Thor and co to traverse the stars in search of Gore and the kidnapped children. Of course, this did ultimately wind up to be a bit of a bad thing as well, as Gore was able to use it to try to open the way to eternity, which probably would have ended really bad if Thor wasn't able to give a rousing speech that just tugged at Gore's heartstrings. And side note, the whole change to Gore trying to find eternity as opposed to building a god bomb is probably a little bit more believable of a storyline than, him trying to build a planet-sized bomb, but I'm not really sure which one is more fun. Probably the bomb one. The comic version of Stormbreaker is quite similar to the one that we got on the screen, except for one major factor. It doesn't actually belong to Thor. It is instead the hammer used by the horse-faced warrior from Beyond the Stars, Beta Ray Bill. It's also a lot smaller. In fact, physically, the film version of Stormbreaker is a lot closer in appearance to the Ultimate Universe version of Mjolnir, which is kinda neat, as the MCU often pulls a lot of inspiration from the Ultimate comics. So it is appropriate, I guess. So that's a thing. Still haven't gotten an actual appearance by Bill, by the way. Just his face on the side of a building, which is sad, as a lot of fans want to see it. Maybe someday he'll pop up somewhere, but at this point, I wouldn't really hold my breath. Gungnir is one of the earliest god weapons we see within the MCU, appearing for the first time in the hands of Odin at the beginning of the first solo Thor film. And that is largely where it stayed, in the hands of the rulers of Asgard, not really doing a lot. Historically, this spear, whose name isn't actually said within the film, so apologies if I mispronounce it, is actually incredibly important. Thor, Odin's father, used it to defeat the Dark Elves and their leader Malekith when they tried to plunge the universe into darkness. Later on, Odin himself wielded it while he fought back the frost giants of Jotunheim, taking it to their frozen homeland and using it to defeat the giants' leader, right before kidnapping a blue baby who went on to become Loki. From there, we didn't really see it do much. A tie-in comic explained that Odin used Gungnir to send Thor back to Earth to stop Loki during the Avengers, since the Bifrost was still pretty wrecked at the time. But that's about it. The last time we actually saw it was during Thor Ragnarok, when Thor used it very briefly during his fight with his sister Hela, before it was thrown to the ground and presumably destroyed when Surtur blew the entirety of Asgard to smithereens. Will we ever see this fancy-looking spear again within the films? If I had to venture a guess, probably not, as Ragnarok seems to be a pretty definitive way to destroy pretty much anything. But who knows? Out in the wider multiverse, there's sure to be a ton of different versions of it, so maybe someday a variant Odin or variant Thor or somebody will show up carrying the spear. Could be cool, maybe in Secret Wars. I don't know, we'll see. Now we get into the weapons that we really don't know too much about, but they're still in the MCU, so it might be good to go over what we do know about them. First up is Khonshu's Crescent Moon Staff, which is that thing there. That's really all we know about it. Well, okay, we know a little bit more. Basically, Khonshu can fight with this thing, pretty well in fact. He can also use this staff to better channel his godly powers, such as when he moved the moon and the stars alongside Mark and Layla when they needed to get a look at how the sky looked years prior. That's something that probably freaked a lot of people out. At first, you probably assume that it's just something that only Layla and Mark can see, but then we see that people miles away are able to see it as well. So you know, that's a pretty good cause for panic. Probably led to a pretty fun news broadcast at least. This just in, I have absolutely no idea what the hell is going on anymore. The sky just moved for no discernible reason. There are characters out of myths and legends walking around like that's not a big deal. And yeah, let's not forget the fact that a good chunk of us just spent the last 5 years looking like the contents of a dive bar ashtray because some pissed off purple dude finished his rock collection and figured that would be a good way to celebrate. Living in this world really sucks. I need a drink. The most recent addition to the God Weapon arsenal within the MCU is the one that's only appearance, as of the recording of this video, came during the mid-credit scene of Thor Love and Thunder, meaning I have no footage of it, because the movie's still in theaters. But yeah, anyways, I'm talking about Hercules' Golden Mace. Since we don't have any info about it in the movies, let's instead take a look at its comic counterpart, because otherwise I wouldn't really have anything to say. Not that looking at its comic counterpart really does much to fix that problem. This beastly looking mace was forged by Hephaestus, the Olympian god of fire and metal, specifically for Hercules. Crafted out of adamantine, a divine metal which the more widely known adamantium is named after, it was designed to replace the plain old wooden one that Herc used while he was still young and still mortal. Strength-wise, this thing is nigh on indestructible, and is said to equal Mjolnir in terms of its smashing power and durability. It might not grant its user the ability to conjure lightning or anything like that, but it has been used in the past to redirect many different kinds of energy, due in large part to the materials in which it was crafted. Beyond that, there really isn't a ton to say about it. It's a cool mace that Hercules is really fond of. Be honest though, do you really need to know any more than that? I didn't think so. Of course, I've got to mention Zeus's lightning bolt here. This metallic thunderbolt is quite the impressive piece of kit. In the hands of the King of Olympus, it could be used to summon and control storms, as well as be thrown with pinpoint accuracy. When thrown, it can even split off into several smaller versions of itself, a feature that the arrogant and eccentric Zeus was seen using in order to liven up his entrance during the movie. Outside of that, the only real noteworthy thing that we saw it do within the film was split in two so it could be dual wielded, which is kind of cool, I guess, in a like early 2000s high schooler kind of way. That's like some borderline mall ninja stuff right there. Oh, and also Thor used it to imbue a bunch of kids with some of his power temporarily, though that's yet to be seen if that's something that the weapon itself allowed him to do or just something that he could always do. Jury's still out on it. Figured I had to talk about the Necrosword here at least a little bit. This dark yet rather unassuming looking blade is rather unique when it comes to weapons, both godly and otherwise, as this is the first one that is said to be able to kill gods outright, something that's proved to be pretty difficult any other time it was attempted. And all that such power costs, it eventually corrupts its user, and kills them if they get separated from it, which is really not what you want. Here's the thing though. Is this actually a god weapon? Sure, in the comics it's called All Black and is wielded by Null, an elder god. So the comic version is definitively a god weapon. But the movie version? We never actually find out where it came from or who created it, so it's kind of hard to say. So it could very well be a full-on god weapon. It could also very well not be. Who really knows at this point? That being said, given what it is capable of, and the fact that it is apparently widely known by the god community as a whole, I think it is safe to let it be called one. At least safer than the Infinity Gauntlet or the 10 Rings. Or Kamala's Bracer, now that I think about it. Someone could probably make an argument for that being a god weapon, but it ain't gonna be me. Finally, we have Hela's weapon. Weapons? Plural? It's kind of hard to actually define what Hela's weapons really are. In attached media, i.e. not in the movie itself, but still official sources, her blades are called Necroswords, which is just confusing now that we have the Necrosword. Either way, regardless of what these things actually are, Hela is able to manifest bladed weapons from her own body, which she is then able to both wield as typical blades and throw with deadly accuracy, like she did when she killed all of the Warriors 3 in some rather unceremonious ways. She could even give other people these weapons, such as when she conjured up the Blood Axe and gifted it to Scourge. Which is cool and all, but kind of hard to wrap your head around the logistics of. Like, are these weapons made out of her? Either way, we don't really know, and we probably won't ever know because she is very dead. Hey there everybody, I'm John Aljets, I'm in this video, and I want to know what you think. Which of these god weapons do you think is the most powerful? Be sure to let me know your thoughts down in the comments below, or go ahead and shoot me a response over on Twitter. I'd love to hear from you. Thanks for watching, and be sure to subscribe to CBR for more great videos just like this in the future.